books. It's very powerful that way. So anyway, the voice, the coal, so on and so forth. The voice is pure, inarticulated, creative force. It's alluded to in the first verse of the Torah. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. The Talmud states that this was one of the first 10 sayings with which the world was created. Right after this, the Torah reports, the breath of God, the Ruach Elohim, hovered over the face of the waters in Genesis 1:2. The Ruach Elohim merach hefet al pnei hamayim. It hovered over the waters. Bird imagery, things like that. This is the breath, the spirit, the Ruach. It is only after this that God speaks and says, Yehi or, Vayhi or. Genesis 1 and 3. This is his first creative act, and the reason for the sequence in the Sefer Yetzirah of voice, breath, and speech. Isn't that fascinating? Beautifully, beautifully elaborated on. Now it's interesting too how the Sefer Yetzirah describes the idea of engraving and carving the letters. Now, Nibley put this into a context of the Tabula Smaragdina, the emerald tablet of the famous Hermetic Egyptian mystical teachings, and the hypocephalus being engraven, the hieroglyphs engraven in stone, usually jasper, emeralds, green, the color green, very important, so on and so forth. I'm not going to get into all that in this video, but the word chakak is translated as engrave in the Sefer Yetzirah, and it means the removal of material. Now this is kind of interesting because the letters came into existence when the reflected breath removes portions of the direct breath, and this takes place through the various motions of the mouth. See, we're talking physical here. Very interesting. The second process is chatzav, which is translated as carve or quarry. This denotes separating material from its source, as in the verse, from its mountains you quarry chatzav, copper, according to Deuteronomy 8:9. It also refers to quarrying in a spiritual sense, as in, look at God the rock from which you were quarried. Again, the Hebrew chatzav, Isaiah 51:1. That's beautiful, isn't it? The word chatzav thus denotes the process wherein the letter sounds leave the mouth, and these sounds are expressed independently. In this context, engrave, chakak, indicates the articulation and the pronunciation of the sounds, and the word to carve, chatzav, denotes their expression. From the last section of the Sefer Yetzirah, chapter 6, verse 7, we also see that engraving and carving denote meditative process. All letters that are expressed involve the same breath. In a spiritual sense, this means that the same inspiration comes from all letters. This is the Ruach HaKodesh. This Ruach HaKodesh, this Holy Spirit, emanates from Malkut. Since Malkut is called the mouth, that's the very bottom of the tree of life in the Sephiroth, the 10th Sephiroth, that's the foundation, the kingdom. It also denotes mouth. The spirit emanating from it is called speech. Yeah, that makes sense. Just like physical speech, this consists of words, which in turn are comprised of letters, of course. So, the breath is one of them. This is because the breath, the Ruach, is associated with the letter Aleph. And isn't it interesting that Aleph is the first letter of the name of the word for God, Elohim. It's the Aleph, isn't it? So that's kind of interesting. That's Kaplan, the Sefer Yetzirah. Now, in an absolutely outstanding article in the Journal of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, the Southern Jurisdiction, for March-April 2010, brand new out, the 32nd degree Mason Joshua Gunn, he teaches rhetoric. He has an article called The Importance of Speech. Now, this brings in the Freemason aspect of this theme of speech. It's not lost on Freemasonry. It also is emphasized, it is articulated, and it is practiced within Masonic lodges. Listen to how Gunn talks about this. He says, although speech, and this is on page 4 and 5 of this article, although speech and secrecy seem inherently related, speech as such is also important to Freemasons because of the way in which it announces presence. Now this is an interesting, I love this. Unlike writing, speaking to another imparts a degree of personal intimacy and emotion in ways that writing cannot, reminding us that Abraham knew God's presence when he heard his voice. Remember, Abraham kept saying, when God would ask him, where are you? He would say, Hineni. He would say, here am I, Lord, speak to me. It announces presence. That's very interesting how that works. Walter Ong has argued that because sound is indicative of here and now activity, the word as sound establishes here and now personal presence. I submit that the written word speaks death. Now catch this. This is very unique here. I submit that the written word speaks death. That text as such is death, and that only the personal presence of speech can enliven it. In Masonic ritual, speech paradoxically becomes a kind of writing in sound when it is inscribed upon the mind as a promise, otherwise known as the speech pact. My argument is that the importance of speech is not so much that it is the vehicle of a secret, rather that it is the medium of the Masonic pact. Very interesting theme on speech, isn't it? Furthermore, on page 5. Now think of the information we receive in the endowment. Think of the information we receive through revelation. It announces the presence through the actual speech, the talking. It is in the emotional or the affective character and personal presence of human speech that we can locate the purpose of pacting. Peace. Peace is rooted in the Latin word pax, P-A-X, to be at ease with another. It's related to the Latin pactum, which means to fix or to secure. These ancient words are antecedent to a pact, an agreement between two or more parties in the interest of peace. Insofar as speech is not speech without two parties, a vocalization with no one to hear it is merely that voice. We find that a pact is already implicit in the concept of speech as such. If you are listening and I am speaking, then we are at peace, at least temporarily. Well, this redundancy, the sense of the term the speech pact, is somewhat redundant. And this redundancy is interesting because at the center of Masonic labor, things are repeated in speech over and over and over again. And you Masons out there who listen to this, you'll know. Absolutely. They are constantly repeated over and over again. But notice the context here. This is so interesting how he brings this out. Things are repeated over and over again, as if to reestablish peace and harmony at every syllabic utterance. And that's one of the great ideals and rules and methods and means and hopes and works of Masonry, is to establish peace. Absolutely. We take that serious. In other words, insofar as Freemasonry concerns the establishment of peace and harmony among a brotherhood of equals, ritualized speech is the primary way in which this is achieved. The obligation is the most obvious performance of Masonic's ritualized speech pact, but I would also argue the opening and closing of a lodge, the formal manner in which we address one another, the recitation of the Psalm 133, even toasts at agapes and festival boards, these are ways in which our pact to each other is renewed in speech.